Welcome back to Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a really fascinating publication, the Equinox.
Right.
It called itself the official organ of the air and the review of scientific Illuminism. Now, the air, that was Aleister Crowley's magical
It's a
order.
very influential one, yeah, in scientific Illuminism.
Well, that framing itself tells you a lot, doesn't it? This blend of the spiritual with a kind of rigorous, almost experimental approach.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack some of the ideas, often quite contradictory ideas, swirling around in that early 20th century mix of occultism, literature, and philosophy.
Such a fertile period, the lines between art, spirituality, science.
Yeah.
They were just incredibly blurry, very fluid. And these sources, they don't just give us the ideas themselves, but also the reaction, the often really polarized public response.
That's a great point. Let's maybe start with Victor B. Neuburg's poetry. It's featured pretty prominently. What jumped out at you about how people reacted to it? Oh, it's the sheer range. I mean, it's almost unbelievable how contradictory the reviews were. You've got the London opinion, for instance, just dismissing it, calling it full of the murmurous monotones of whispering lust, the song of young desire, and that kind of poppycock.
Ha, poppycock. That's pretty blunt.
Yeah, really lays it on thick. Ouch.
But then you turn around, and the Jewish Chronicle finds it eminently recommendable, praising its, quote, pagan glamour, passion, and vigor, and even highlighting its focus on Scandinavian theology, which they felt was neglected. How does one work at those two takes?
And it doesn't stop there. The Manchester Guardian comes in and sees so luxurious, so rampant, a decadence that quickly palls. They called it a grievous exhibition of recklessness and folly.
Wow. Recklessness and folly versus pagan vigor.
Exactly. It really shows, I think, the cultural clash happening then. Traditional views bumping right up against these newer, more boundary-pushing spiritual and artistic ideas.
Definitely. And then Robert Ross in The Bystander throws in another curveball.
Yeah.
He claimed Neuburg's poetry actually answered Elizabeth Barrett Browning's riddle about great god Pan.
Yeah. What was he doing to great god Pan? Down in the reeds by the river. Apparently, the answer's in the poetry.
So, okay, face to this barrage of totally conflicting opinions. How should someone listening, how should you approach material that's so fiercely debated?
Well, it forces you to be critical, doesn't it? You can't just take one review at face value. You have to ask, okay, what's the context here? Who's writing this? What might their agenda be? It's about developing your own judgment, really.
That makes sense. And this whole Neuburg debate, it kind of sets the stage perfectly for Aleister Crowley himself in the Equinox.
Yeah.
His essay, The Dangers of Mysticism, that really cuts against the grain of a lot of spiritual thinking, right?
Oh, absolutely. Crowley was very deliberate in drawing a line between magic and mysticism. Magic for him was mathematical. Equilibration, he put it as 1 plus max 1 equals 0. It's a kind of active combat with illusion.
Okay, like bringing things into balance.
Right. Mysticism, though, he saw as simpler, maybe too simple. Dissolution. 1 equals 0. Like a grain of salt cast into the sea. It just disappears.
Huh. And he wasn't a fan of that disappearing act.
Not really. He was actually quite critical of mystics, accused them of spiritual pride, of being solitary and shut up, losing the ability to, quote, look any fact in the face, said they preferred make-believe, pretending difficult things are only illusion.
So he's basically saying they're avoiding reality. That's a pretty strong charge. What was his antidote then?
To counter that, he prescribed a skeptical or scientific attitude. A healthy life, he literally compared it to being an athlete or an explorer, and things like hearty human companionship and devotion to life, work, and duty.
Right. Engagement with the world, not withdrawal.
Exactly. He even said an ounce of honest pride is better than a ton of false humility, which, yeah, that does kind of flip typical spiritual advice on its head.
It really does. And connecting this back to the OEA, the organization the Equinox represented, they had some pretty lofty goals, didn't they?
Immensely ambitious. Their stated aim was bringing followers to absolute truth, absolute light, absolute bliss, and they were very results-focused about it. They claimed that in their first 3 years, not one man in whom 3 months' work has not produced at least one notable result.
That's quite a claim. And they had this rigorous process, right?
Yeah.
Designed to fortify the fit and, interestingly, eliminate the unfit when choosing their adepts, their advanced members.
Yes, very structured.
But doesn't that risk becoming, a bit too exclusive?
Yeah.
Or maybe even dogmatic? That eliminate the unfit part sounds harsh, almost like something Crowley might criticize elsewhere.
That's a fair point to raise. From Crowley's perspective, I think he saw his system as fundamentally scientific. And science, well, it requires discipline, adherence to method. The unfit in that view are maybe just those who couldn't or wouldn't stick to the program, wouldn't get the results. It points to a very active philosophy of spiritual work, almost athletic, not passive waiting.
Active versus passive. That's a key distinction here. So we've dug into quite a bit this era of bold, sometimes shocking exploration, from poetry that split critics down the middle to these challenging ideas about mysticism and this really demanding path to enlightenment.
It's powerful stuff.
And it's not just history, is it? It kind of holds up a mirror and makes you think, today, with so much information, so many belief systems competing for attention, how do you cultivate that scientific attitude Crowley talked about? How do you sort the genuine insight from the, well, from the make-believe or the poppycock?
That's the real takeaway question, isn't it? Something to mull over.